yeah, the 3 years in between those records was, did you have material, you know, given that, like you said, the overnight sensation of APC over a dozen years, was there material still that was even pre the first album that found its way into the second album?
Yeah, Weak and Powerless for sure was there, and I wanted to do Weak and Powerless on Maynard, but I never really. That was like I said, one of the oldest songs I had, and I never cracked the code on it musically. It was okay, and I now remember demoing. Actually, when you asked me if I never went to the studio, we went to, what was it, Eric Valentine's studio, I think, in Hollywood, had like a rehearsal slash recording studio. And I remember Josh putting down a track of that. And now I totally forgot about this, but it was like the more realized demo of that. And it still wasn't quite there. I knew there was something to be had. There was something special about this song, but it just wasn't happening then. And then, yeah, so I had that, and then cracked the code on Weak and Powerless really close to the end, really, really close. I had call it version 2, because version 1 of that was much different. Version 2 was the one I'm talking about that was around in 99. Then version 3, which is the version you hear today, is I completely flipped it. Like, it cracked the code one day. Like, sometimes it just like clicks. And I remember, like, Maynard had already sung on that song on version 2, and I think he was down for it, and I went and ripped it to the floor and made a new song, almost the same key, same sort of notes, but the feel was like it is today. And I was honestly, I was nervous to present it to him, because he had already kind of got pregnant with the idea of, he already put his mark on that other one. And sometimes you don't want to like completely flip the script on someone and go like, well, I sang with this intention, now I'm thinking something else. So it was one of the times when I go, I wonder if he's going to hate this, because, we all get demo years. And luckily he was like, no, it's right. It was like immediately welcoming it, because, you get to the point of like, I think I know where he's at. But then again, Maynard got 3, well, at that time, 2 projects, but he's got different hats to wear and different things to think about, different than I do. Now I'm kind of joining that thing in recent years, because I've got my own thing and I've got Perfect Circle, and I've got to find where those things sit. They're naturally kind of unfolding at this point. It's one of the reasons for the name change from Ashes to Me. I'll explain later, but yeah, that song was around for a while. Weak and Powerless, and then Vanishing was a song that I very stupidly named Untitled or so. I just went to the default. I started this song and didn't name it, so it got lost. And I was looking for that song. What the hell was that song called? And I could almost play it. I kind of had that song around in '99. So once 13th Step came, I kind of found it. I was like, oh my god, it's in this folder. It's just Untitled. It was in like a not even to be looked at kind of bin within my song folder. So that made it onto the record. Yeah, the rest of 13th Step, there's a lot of newer stuff. I wrote Blue. The bass line for Blue was a 1 pass, 1 take. Like, I just had redone my studio. I built, bought a house, built a studio in the basement. 9/11 happened. And, obviously the world shut down. So the construction was kind of in limbo just after that, so that I can think of when I wrote it. So it must have been October or November of 2001. Just plugged in a bass. First thing I did to check the speakers, and just that riff came out. And that's basically the whole song. Like, the first take, that was the track on the record. Like, that's the finished bass, is that take. So a lot of things were kind of closer to the release of that I can think of. There's many things that were written closer to the release of 13th Step.
And then there was also the Failure cover from one of the greatest post-hardcore rock records ever. Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Ken Andrews produced a record that you played on prior to this. Is that right? Abandoned Pools, maybe?
Oh, yeah. I didn't play on the record. I met
You
Tommy.
played live with them, right? That was
Yeah, I played live with them, maybe like 2 shows at like the Key Club. Yeah, I actually met Tommy from Danny Lohner's now ex-wife, who worked at a record label that Abandoned Pools was signed to. And it was actually Yoshiki, the drummer for X from Japan, his label, which I don't remember the name of the label. But yeah, so she was talking about, oh, you might love this band, and I think it'd be cool maybe for you to come check them out. And I loved it. And then I think she told them, and they're like, okay, let's meet up. And I met up with them, and we talked about writing in the future. It just kind of fizzled, but
Ecstasy Records, I think, right? It was
yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I think it was an imprint through one of the majors. Yeah, I love Failure, and was there,
and that was Maynard's idea. The Nurse Who Loved Me, that was his completely, his idea to put that on the record. And really, I had nothing to do with that song. There's only a few songs that I've never touched with APC. That's, I think, one of 2. Like, that was
interesting. Danny
Lohner and Maynard going over to, I think, John O'Brien's studio and just messing around with all these cool vintage instruments and, oil can reverbs and shit like that, harmoniums, and they came back with some really interesting sounds, very different than the record. Because, for the most part, I play most of the things on most of the instruments on APC. So it was nice to have this completely different thing and to walk into, oh my God, this is unexpected. This is not what I would do. So it was a nice welcome input.
Yeah, there are some, and going through the liner notes this morning, there are some other John Bryan, and then like the string players, and there's some other musicians credited that are just on that song.
Yeah, that quartet came over to my house. I have a recording studio in the basement. It's a really nice studio, and we had this big kind of cathedral ceiling living room, and it was such a cool day having the string quartet there and echo, and having mics set up all around in the hallway, back in the bathroom, and capturing all that. That was a cool thing. I kind of wish we did more of that after, and I considered doing like orchestra versions of, certainly of Meredith Noams. I talked some years ago about doing that. I was almost setting up to go to Slovakia to have the orchestra like literally play some of these things. I was working with an orchestrator, and I still plan on doing that at some point down the road, because I think it would lend itself to it.
It would be so cool. And obviously, like, we both talked about our love for new wave and dark romantic stuff in our formative years. And of course, synths and keyboards and all of that are magical in their own right. Having said that, there's just nothing compares to when a band gets actual string players in the studio,
and I was lucky to have Paz, Paz, her first bass player, Rosalind Chantin. She's an amazing, has such a personality on violin. And she can make it a gypsy violin, a gypsy, kind of aesthetic, or, go right to straight classical. And she was awesome. And her, dear departed brother, Luciano, also played on the record. He played viola. So she played violin, Luciano played viola on 3 Libras on Meredith Noam.
Yeah, when I think about violins and rock music, I think about the first APC record, and I think about My Dying Bride, one of my favorite bands. And that, that's a violin player who's headbanging, which is pretty cool. So, I mentioned the Failure cover also because, of course, the next record that we heard from APC was a cover album, which is almost a misnomer to describe it that way, because, traditionally when a band's going to cover a song, I see it as like there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do the 100% faithful, where maybe there's a hint of it being your band because of the vocalist or whatever, or you can do completely reimagined, like you were talking about with one of your own songs, a Florida, what is it, stem to stern, is that the saying, like, just total refurbishing, right? And I think of eMOTIVe as like the quintessential, I think of A Perfect Circle as the band that set the stage for a person can be in bands of equal value and stature simultaneously. And I think of eMOTIVe as like the record that is the blueprint for if you're going to do a cover album and you're going to radically reimagine everything. Like,
yeah,
that's the record, you know, that's the one.
There's two ways to go. Yeah, like you said, it's an honoring of it by doing your own take. I guess you could look at the other way as an honoring of it to try and really discover how you made that song sound like it does and do a verbatim copy. But that just wasn't interesting to us. You know, we wanted to kind of bring a very fresh reimagining of most of those songs, you know, to be, the bummer of that is you don't get any publishing. There's music that I wrote that would have been on other records, you know, that you're kind of screwed in that way. You know, you wrote half the song that might have nothing to do with the vocal, because the vocal just got put on top of this thing that existed already. And that's a bit of a drag.
That's
a bit of a financial drag.
Yeah. Well, you think about the Verve not getting paid for years and years for their biggest hit.
Yeah.
Not even necessarily the Stones, but like whoever recorded the string version of the Stones song owns some kind of rights. Or
that sounded, I don't know all the details, but what I did know sounded awful.
They did eventually make it right in very recent years.
Okay, good.
Like Keith stepped up.
And, band, by the way, I love the Verve.
Me too.
That oh man, a great record.
Yeah, and to try to say that song's a cover, it's like come on.
Yeah, and it's a scary thing, you know, when you're influenced by things, and I kind of assume that people don't do that on purpose, but it's hard not to, you know, hear something and you might not have heard it for 5, 10, 15 years, and then it creeps into a session. You know, that one was just weird. I can't imagine malicious intent by the Verve, or, you know,
no.
Heard a few of these things. Now in recent pop history, I've heard things that go, that's that sounds like someone just young enough, not wise enough to go, oh, no one will notice if I rip off, you know, this riff from the 80s.
Yeah, I've seen it in recent years. There was a couple situations where, I know of two, where a band tried to license a piece of art for their album cover. The artist said no. And so they just went to another artist and said, hey, this was the art we wanted. Can you just do something that's basically exactly like it? Mm-hmm. And not only did that, but like unapologetically, like, well, yeah, what's wrong with that? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, that's a whole side tangent we could go down. When you're assembling these songs, and thematically, you know, there were a lot of anti-war songs and this and that, so they certainly fit together in a number of different ways. What's the process in terms of, because it seems like what you did is you really sought to capture the essence or the spirit of each song. And what's the process of like finding that, you know, like I'm sure it's different with every song, but, you know, I mean, was it just a lot of listening through and learning, and then kind of, you know, it's like, oh, I want to keep this chord progression, but I want to change this? Or
yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I think that I don't know. It was a pretty rapid recording process. And it was a lot of like cool discovery, but really fast paced discovery. You know, I don't think there was a lot of belaboring on things. And I don't know. I think it goes to show, like, the song doesn't need to be one way. I mean, the thing my vision board, that if I wrote it on a note or I didn't, it was, you know, My Way by Frank Sinatra. There was already a trail blazed for that. I'll just kind of see what that trail is like to walk down.
Yeah. And I mean, in the Sid version, certainly becomes its own song.
Yeah.
I did want to tell you real quick, off the record, just a fun little anecdote, which is that during eMOTIVE is the only opportunity I've had over the years to interview Maynard. And we have, you know, mutual friends and stuff, but I'd never met him or anything. And I interviewed him, was impressed for that record. And we met at the 101 Diner.
Nice.
And had breakfast and talked about eMOTIVE. And then at the end of the interview, he goes, that was really cool, man. Let's keep in touch. Here's my card. And he puts a business card on the table and slides it over to me. And I'm like, you know, inside, I'm like, what? I just become friends with Maynard. This is all, and I didn't want to look at it in front of him, so I just kind of took it and was like, yeah, cool, man, yeah, cool. I'll drop you a line and said goodbye, and he left. And then I looked. You already know where it's going. I flipped it over and it said Jesus H Christ, winemaking and water sports. No contact info.
Yeah, pretty good. Josh's just says Josh Freeze since 1972. I think that was his card.